welcome back to the Scenario 7 podcast. My name is Sam and I'm joined by my lovely co-hosts Josh Bacon and Joe Roberts. How are you two doing?
I'm doing good, apart from this proposal for the Super League in football. Apart from that, I'm fine.
Of course, it had to be mentioned. I'm doing great with the result of the F1.
Yeah, no, it's good to have you here. We're here to talk about F1 though, Joe. You can't have a rant about football. But yeah, this week we're going to be reviewing the Formula One Pirelli Grand Prix of Made in Italy and of Emilia Romagna 2021. And it was a great race. It was a really good race. I mean, we had drama from the start. I mean, going to the track, never mind before the formation lap, before lap one, we had drama. We had Alonso going into a wall, and we had Aston Martin cars both having brake problems with Vettel's catching on fire. What were your thoughts? What were your thoughts on before the race? I mean, we had questions about whether Alonso was going to get his car fixed in time, and we had questions over the Aston Martin. Did you think they were both going to race, or do you have doubts?
I had my. You go.
Oh, sorry, Josh. I didn't really watch the start as in towards the grid. I think I only watched like the grid walk, but from what I've heard, it looked like I was surprised the Aston Martin, like Lance Stroll, stayed on his grid, because obviously Vettel had to start from the pit lane. But I think in those the conditions at the start, I think you kind of knew. I think the race was going to be something special, with how much drama there is in the race. But I think it was very sketchy conditions, because I think it was a mix. It was kind of between wets and inters at the time of the start of the race.
Yeah, I had my doubts with the Aston Martins, because obviously the images showed that I can't remember who it was, if Stroll or Vettel, but one of their brakes were literally on fire, and then it literally burnt through to something they had to try and replace, which they said would usually take half an hour, but they did it in 15 minutes. And then unfortunately for Seb, we didn't get it done in time. But then with Alonso, I thought it was just a quick wing change before, so that wasn't too bad. But then when they started filming and they first went out onto the track, you could see that it was raining like 100 meters down the track in the first corner, but where they were standing, it was bone dry. So it was weird to see how parts of the track were dry and parts of them were wet, but it did make the race more interesting.
Yeah, the conditions were certainly really strange and really tricky with different dry and wet parts of the track. I mean, Charles Leclerc learned that on the formation lap, the first got to go spinning without damage. But getting on to the actual race. I mean, it all started lap one. Max Verstappen, what a getaway on Lewis Hamilton, overtaking into turn one. There are a few people that think that Verstappen could have given a bit more room, and that damage that Lewis got didn't need to happen, because Verstappen could have left it a little bit view. What are your guys' views on that?
Personally, I think Verstappen was entitled to be where he was. He was slightly in front. He had the position. He had the racing line. I think Lewis. I think he also said in the post-race interview that he should have backed off a bit, because he said he couldn't have kept on going to keep on the racing line, and obviously he went over the yellow bumps. But yeah, I think Max was entitled to be there, and he just did what any race driver would.
I think for me, if that was a full, like, not at the start, I would kind of say Hamilton was entitled to some space. But I think for the start of the race, I think especially I don't think they had any running on the wets and when to brake. I could understand why Max went a bit wide, and I think he was intending to leave him some space, because you can probably tell by the way he just from the footage, it looks like he braked, but then obviously the car just didn't want to brake quick enough, and obviously. Yeah, and then Hamilton just got onto the curb. He probably should have backed out, but I think at that point, you kind of have to try and trust the driver beside you to give you some room. But again, it's lap one, so I think it's a racing. It'll be just a racing incident.
Yeah, certainly a racing incident. And then lap 2, we had our first safety car. I mean, I was surprised that we got through lap 1 without one, to be honest. But yeah, Latifi went spinning and then he rejoins the track and he just keeps coming over to the right. He keeps veering over. And Mazepin's just driving in a straight line. He's doing nothing wrong. He's completely fine. And then Latifi hits him and goes into a wall and completely writes off his car, starting a really, really poor day for Williams in the end. What were your thoughts on that incident? Nothing Mazepin could have done, is there?
I think it's also I think Latifi just didn't see him because obviously it's wet. But I do think Mazepin should have probably in that. But I forgot what the corner was. I think it's going to be like 2 rights. He probably should have just backed out and then tried to get him on the straight. I think he will probably understand that with like more racing. But I think it's quite hard just due to the fact the Haas car is not particularly good in any conditions or around probably any track. So I think I would say it's Latifi's fault, but I think Mazepin should have backed out knowing that it was going to be a very hard overtake to make on Latifi.
Yeah, at first thought when I saw it, I did think it was Mazepin's fault, but then from the replays, it definitely showed Latifi coming back on track and then just drifting across the track, leaving Mazepin no space whatsoever, and just bringing in the contacts. Then also when Latifi was coming back on track, it's difficult to see all the way around the car, obviously, because they're strapped in so tight, and we've also got the halo in the way, so they can't obviously see everything or everyone. So it was a reasonably safe release, but then it was just silly for him to drift all over.
Yeah. Then the other Haas driver was involved in an incident just on lap 4, so just 2 laps later, under safety car. Mick Schumacher did what George Russell did last year. He's there trying to warm up his tyres on the safety car, completely loses the back end of the car and ends up without a front wing. I mean, this was comedic. The fact that not necessarily the fact he lost his front wing, but then that incident caused the pit lane to close, so he couldn't go in and repair it. So under safety car, you used to have a car like really far at the back without a front wing that you just can't go into the pits. I mean, that was so funny and just summed up just such another really, really poor day for Haas.
Yeah, it was really funny, but then also it just tried to go too much power on the accelerator, and he was just weaving the car too much in wet conditions. It was never going to end well. Yeah, as you said, it was just funny the fact that he made the pit lane close, so he was just stuck at the back with no wing, just going around doing laps, which was quite funny to see. But yeah, it was all his own fault.
Yeah, it's getting to the point where I think Schumacher and Mazepin probably would rather be in F2 at the moment than be in that Haas car. I think maybe if Schumacher was a bit more pushy, he'd probably try and go for that Alfa Romeo seat. And I think he's possibly regretting not going for it enough. I think, I just don't think that car is drivable, and it's very hard to judge Mazepin and Schumacher on their ability. I don't even think Grosjean and Magnussen could get anything out of that car. So I think it's going to be a very, very, very tough season for Haas, and I don't think they can judge the drivers on their ability just due to the fact of how poor that car is.
Yeah. Lap 12, a steward's decision was made that That hurt me. Sergio Perez got a 10-second penalty for overtaking under safety car, and it was the correct decision. I don't. He did go off, and then he did re-overtake the two cars. However, the two cars in front of him did like let him pass. Like they clearly broke a long time before the corner, and were pretty much saying to him get go past. So if I was a racer in that situation, you see these two cars letting you pass, you're instinctively going to get past. So do you think that Sergio was a bit hard done by with the 10-second penalty?
No, no. I'm just being honest. Absolutely no. I think in that instance, it's the Red Bull engineers should basically know the rules that if you go off track at any point and get as in Max Verstappen was lucky that Charles Leclerc like later on in the race didn't get past him. So yeah, it's by the rules that the FIA set out for safety, and if you let again, you could blame Ricardo and I think it was Gasly, but the team should know the rules and it shouldn't be based off the driver or the driver's slowing down for some reason. For me, the penalty was justified, and it could have been worse if there was, for example, he's four or five drivers got in front of him. It could have been a lot worse of a penalty.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Joe with that. It was definitely a penalty, but I also agree with you, Sam, that it was weird from Ricardo because he saw him go off and then went around the corner and just like braked. It would go really slowly and there's a massive gap, which then almost caused Gasly to go into the back of him, but luckily he avoided him. But then uh, him going back past them was definitely worth the penalty because obviously it's in the rule book, you can't do it. So it was a strange one, but the 10-second penalty was correct.
Yeah. No, as much as it hurts, I agree. The 10-second penalty was justified. It was just really frustrating with the two cars stopping in front, and I understand that caused confusion. The next thing that really happened was a nightmare few laps for Hamilton. He went for an overcut on Verstappen. He then has a slow 4-second penalty, not penalty, 4-second pit stop with his front right trying to go up. That was lap 29. Then lap 31, the drama really started again. First of all, Hamilton losing it, trying to lap Russell, hitting a wall, but somehow reversing back on track. And luckily for him, it's a bit weird to be saying this, but an incident soon after that really helped him with Russell going for an overtake on Bottas. And Russell ends up going onto a bit of grass, spins, takes them both out, causing a red flag, which definitely helped Hamilton. What are you guys' perspective on the crash? It was deemed a racing incident, but do you hold either the drivers to account for it?
I think the way Anthony Davidson described it on the Sky Pad after the race was the way I viewed it as well. So obviously it's called the home straight, but there's a clear left kink towards the end of the home straight, which confuses the drivers. So you can see why Bottas continued going in the way he was going, and then obviously Russell was behind him with DRS and the slipstream, which means he's going to be so much faster than Bottas in the first place. And when you've got that speed, you're not going to back out of the fight because you're wanting to overtake them. So I can see why they both thought it was each other's fault, because obviously Bottas came over slightly and then went back over again. But it's just a natural kink of the corner, like I said, and Russell's always gonna go for the position. It's just unfortunate that the grass was still wet. So yeah, it was just a racing incident.
Yeah, for me, same. I think it was just a racing incident. I think I would say maybe you would put, as in I remember Toto Wolff saying it was a 60-40. And for me, that 60-40 would go against, I think it was more Bottas' fault than Russell. I think because from the footage from I don't think there was any on board with Bottas, but he looked like he went round the like kink section and went slightly right and then stayed straight, which then Russell going behind had to then kind of move his steering wheel a lot more, and then which got him to the grass and then which caused the crash. But yeah, again, I would say it's a racing incident.
Yeah. It was. It didn't finish with the crash. I mean, afterwards, they're both in the gravel, and Russell goes over to Bottas and hits Bottas's helmet, with Bottas giving him the middle finger at the same time. I mean, not quite the sportsmanship you really want to be seeing in the sport, but you understand at the heat of the moment, you're gonna be mad. But maybe cool it down enough to not end up getting in a fight, because I thought that was a bit childish. But yeah, red flag. Hamilton's down in eighth, and he's a lot of people think he has no chance, but with that car, he always has a chance. Red flag restart was on lap 35. Yuki loses it and spins. Perez then spins lap 38, costing him points, which was horrible. But yeah, while this is going on, there isn't any more particular incidents, but Hamilton's going up and up the grid, making a push for a podium. And then lap 60 out of 63, after some, I have to admit, Lando Norris, fair play to him. He did a really great job. His defending for Lewis in the laps before Lewis actually overtook him was phenomenal. But yeah, on lap 60, Lewis just had too much pace, took second place. And yeah, that was kind of the end of the massive instance of the race, finishing Verstappen first, Hamilton second, and Norris third. Now moving on to how each team did. Starting with Red Bull, what do you think they'll take away from the race?
I I think it's quite hard for them, as in they can take the fact that they've got an equal pace car with Mercedes, which could make this championship probably one of the best championships probably since 2010, I would say, or maybe 2012 with Vettel, and then all those four drivers battling champion in 2010, and then obviously 2012 Alonso and Vettel. I think it could be that, and even Rosberg and Hamilton. I think it'd be that explosive with Max Verstappen and Hamilton, which I know people like it when Hamilton does poorly, but I think for me, I think for the sport, I think you have to appreciate that Lewis Hamilton is the best driver in the last probably decade. That you are also witnessing probably Max Verstappen being the best driver in this decade. I think from what Red Bull can take out of it is that Max Verstappen is probably, if they continue this performance, they will be able to keep Max Verstappen from other teams, just due to the fact of them performing very well.
Yeah, I agree with Joe, but if we're just talking in terms of just this weekend, I think they can say they've had a reasonably good weekend, because they look strong in all the free practices, and then obviously qualifying P2 and P3. Obviously, neither of them were happy, because I think Perez said he thought he could go faster, and obviously Verstappen made mistakes costing him pole. But still, P2 and P3 was an excellent qualifying session. And coming to the race, obviously Verstappen winning there's nothing better you can do. And it was such a comfortable race for him. So they'll be really pleased with that. But then it's just Perez. I think he's just still getting used to the car, because you can see that throughout most of the race, he's got the pace in that car. He's just making too many mistakes because he's not quite used to it, I think. So that costs him higher points. That cost him higher points today. But yeah, you can still see he's an excellent driver. He'll get used to the car quickly. So in terms of the weekend, I think they can be positive rather than negative.
Sure. I mean, the conditions didn't help Perez. I mean, you're getting used to the car, and at the same time, the conditions are rubbish. But yeah, I think Red Bull will be really happy with Verstappen's win, but gutted with Perez not getting points. But someone that will be happy that Perez didn't get points is Mercedes. Hamilton somehow, with an incredible recovery drive, coming second, and then Bottas's DNF. So they will be so happy Perez didn't get points. So they can still have they can still look good in the constructors. And what did you make of the what do you think? How do you think the Mercedes will be feeling? I mean, they're still ahead. They have that lead on the Red Bull, but Bottas, he's looking poor.
Yeah, I think they'll be satisfied because obviously Lewis still got decent points in P2, and then Perez, as you said, crashing out. But they won't be happy. One half of the garage will be ecstatic because he's getting exactly the most out of that car that he can do. And then obviously Bottas hit, was it P8 in qualifying, and then crashing out in the race, and just didn't look quick. He couldn't get past. I think it was Gasly he was stuck behind for quite a long time at the start of the race. We just didn't look good in the car. So I think they'll be satisfied that they're still top of the constructors and Lewis got them points, but they're not good. They wouldn't have said this is a great weekend.
Yeah, I agree with Josh. I think from Bottas's point of view, I think you'll be looking at hoping that every single race is not wet. I think it's been absolutely dreadful. I think from every single wet race has been, which is a massive concern for him in terms if he wants to win the championship this season, and also provide enough evidence for Toto Wolff and the Mercedes, Mercedes CEO to even give him another contract. I think if it continues, I think Russell will be knocking at that door, or another driver to get that seat for next season. But I think Bottas will have to come back next race. I think it's Portimao. He needs a good race in that around that track, or I think his season might be done before he's even started. But apart from that, I think again I agree with Josh with Lewis Hamilton's side. I think they'll be quite ecstatic that he managed to salvage a very poor situation for him into a very positive one by passing, sadly to say, pretty quick Ferraris and a Norris who I think is slowly growing into a very mature F1 driver, and he now just needs McLaren to provide a better package in order to compete with the Red Bulls and Mercedes in order to win races.
You mentioned there the McLaren and Ferrari, and it looks like they could have a really good battle on their hands for who's going to get third in the constructors. What did you make of those two teams as weekends? Both of all the drivers looking really good, and but yeah, what do you think about their weekend, and how do you think the battle could go on through the season?
Oh God, no. I really hate this question because I know I've been slagging off that Ferrari package quite a lot, even for like free videos. But yeah, I think McLaren are in front of them in terms of their package and performance. But it'd be interesting to see if Ferrari decide to use their tokens this season or obviously into next. So I think it'd be wet. I think whoever wins that inter-team battle will be based off, I think, their whatever tokens they decide to use for the season. But I'm pretty sure McLaren have that upper hand on the Ferraris.
Yeah, well, if we look back to the Imola preview, you'll see that I said that us Ferraris would be really strong. So, when they finished P4 and P5, I was just like, I can't wait to rub this into Joe because of what he was saying. But they looked strong all weekend, minus the qualifying that Science had in P11. That his start for the race was just amazing to put him up there. And then moving on to McLaren's, they just look like they're getting stronger and stronger each season. And then Ricardo obviously still getting used to the car, so P6 is probably was a good result for him, even though he might not have been happy. But the strategy of going onto the softs after the red flag, I wasn't. I'm not gonna lie, I was bricking it. I was like, they're gonna ruin the chances of getting a podium or good points here, but luckily they held off. So I think both teams will be happy, but they'll still know that they've got improvements to make.
Yeah. The Ferraris are looking pretty fast, aren't they, Joe?
Yes, they are.
Moving on to more of the midfield. I mean, it's looking like it will be Aston Martin, Alpine, and AlphaTauri battling out. I mean, it's only 2 weeks in, but I think those three teams will be close to each other. What do you make of that battle for the midfield? Because I'm not going to lie, so far I'm impressed by Stroll and maybe Gasly from those teams. The rest of the drivers had a underwhelming weekend.
Oh, I think it's been a pretty awful start from the Alpines, and the same as the same as the Aston Martin. Just due to the fact I personally thought they'll be a lot better, and I think they want to take legal action because of the low rate. It's just, for me, it's just a bit stupid. I don't understand why they're doing it. It's just using it as a scapegoat just for the fact that they just got a very rubbish car. But I think the AlphaTauri just had bad luck. I don't see any wrong things about their car. It's just the fact that they just had bad luck in the first two races. I think, looking at it now, I think AlphaTauri are the fastest car within that sort of midfield. But apart from that, I think the Aston Martins and also the Alpines will be looking forward to next season.
Yeah, I completely agree with Joe. The Alpines, I'm surprised with, because when they were Renault last year, they competed a lot more than they are doing now. So to see them down in like positions of 13th and 14th is just a surprise, especially with Alonso behind the wheel. But then Aston Martin, I didn't think they'd improve from last race, to be honest. And P7 was a good result for Stroll, but Vettel will carry on with his struggles again. And DNFing at the end of the race. But I agree with Joe. The AlphaTauris are definitely looking the quickest of the bunch. But I think they won't be happy with this race, especially with the home race. They've got practice around this track, and they just didn't really perform well. They made the complete wrong decision with Pierre Gasly going onto the wet tyres instead of intermediates. He just held everyone up and just kept falling down, and then just got unlucky with Tsunoda spinning. But they're definitely the faster team out of the three.
The other three teams are Alfa Romeo, Williams, and Haas. I mean, it's basically a battle between Alfa Romeo and Williams, and then Haas are far below anyone else. It was a good weekend for. It wasn't a great weekend, but it was quite a decent Sunday for them with Raikkonen getting 9th at the moment. At the time of filming, no punishment has been given to him, and hopefully it stays that way. But yeah, with 9th, Williams had a nightmare with Latifi and Russell DNFing, and Haas are an absolute shambles. What did you guys think of those three teams over the course of the weekend?
I think there seems to be a theme here with Williams. Whenever they have like a really good Saturday or a decent Saturday for their standards, the Sunday just always seems to drop off. I can't remember what races, but they did well in qualifying once, and then both of their cars DNF'd just like today. So they have positives because they're definitely getting faster and looking more competitive. They just need to cut out the mistakes, obviously. And then Alfa Romeo, I think both drivers would have been in the top 10 if it wasn't for something they had to take off the back of Giovinazzi's car. They had to come into the pit stop and take something off his tyre or something. So without that, I think they would have both been in the top 10, which would have been a very good weekend for them. And obviously coming to Haas, they were 2 laps down within 10 laps of the race, which is just ridiculous. They were unbelievably slow, and I don't understand what is the point of them being there. Honestly, I know their drivers are getting some experience in F1, but honestly, they're just so slow. It's just pointless them being there.
Yeah, I'm going. I think continue on that Haas point is what has been what team is faster, Manor or Haas? As in, it's getting to that question. Is it like a hybrid between an F2 car and F1 car at this point, with how shocking and woeful that car has become? As in, I probably previously said about this on earlier on, but I just don't. Something doesn't feel right at Haas. If it's either Gene doesn't really want to be in the sport anymore, just waiting for Mazepin's father to take it. Even then, I think that will be bad for the sport, just due to the fact it's just another team going, I would say. But I think the one thing about Williams and Alfa Romeo, they can know from the poor performance from Aston Martin and Aston Martin drivers, and also the Alpine drivers, that they do have a chance for points now, just due to the fact the drop off of performance from those two drivers has been like a second and a half. And obviously Alfa Romeo and Williams have suddenly jumped a bit. So I think even though Williams have DNF'd and it was a very bad weekend, as you said, Sam, I think the Williams team will take positives out of it. In fact, they nearly passed the Mercedes, even though Bottas was pretty dismal today. And it's like, the 2 races in, there's going to be question marks about his seat. I think Williams will take a lot of positive, and even Alfa Romeo, even if they get points, or Raikkonen gets a penalty, I think they'll take positive just due to the fact that they, as Josh said, they possibly could have got 2 drivers into the top 10.
Yeah, I mean, the Haas car, I mean, there was I think with before Vettel retired, Schumacher was a minute behind the car in front, and then Mazepin was a minute behind him. I mean, Mazepin, you have the same car, mate. A minute behind your teammate. I don't care. I don't care what the conditions are. That is atrocious. I mean, the car is slow, but Mazepin, come on, mate. I mean, he's just here for entertainment value at this point and someone to laugh at. I mean, I know we're 2 races in, but that Haas are a shambles. They are embarrassing.
He's in a Formula 3 car at the moment.
Yeah, honestly, Formula 3 cars flipping lap the Haas. It is a shambles. But yeah, moving on to more lighthearted. Last thing we can do, driver of the day. I can have a guess who Josh is going to choose. But yeah, who are your driver of the days?
Well, obviously, like you said, you know who I'm going to choose, and we've hardly spoken about him right now, and I'm going to go on about him. Like, it's obviously Lando Norris, mate. I'm sorry. He didn't have the best of starts. He almost hit Ricciardo, then got contact with Stroll, putting on the P9. But then the recovery and that 3-car overtake on the home straight was just brilliant. And then obviously almost hitting the wall as well just made it so much better. And then coming out after the red flag with soft tyres on a bold strategy, he just made it pay off with overtaking Charles Leclerc straight away, and then holding them off for ages until Lewis Hamilton had to come ruin the fun, and just had to overtake him. But yeah, it's obvious to me. Lando Norris was always going to be my driver of the day.
I think for me, it's quite hard for this race because you can give it to the top three, as any of the top three. I'll probably go one by one now, as in you can give it to Max just due to the fact he was so dominant. It did feel like a potential driver's world championship drive, and due to the fact of the wet conditions and being very tricky, and then pulling ahead of Hamilton and taking the fight to him. And then Hamilton, after the brilliant recovery drive, obviously helped by the red flag, but it's just part of the sport. And the safety. And then Lando Norris with probably they're probably having the massive balls to do that 3 wide. I think was very incredible driving from him. And then obviously then parking it in the middle of the track to evade a very fast Mercedes car for I think 3 or 4 laps. Very impressive from him. But yeah, it was a very good race, and you could even give it to like Leclerc and Sainz. They performed very well. I think they were like 20 or 40, I don't remember the gap, 20 or 30 seconds in front of P6 in Ricardo. So, yeah, I think it was a very impressive drive from the top 5. So, I know it's not a very answer you were looking for, Sam, but I think as a race as a whole, you can give it to any of the top 5.
Well, I'm going to push you on it.
It's called Driver of the Day, not Drivers of the Day.
Yeah, I'm going to push you on it, Joe. Who is your driver of the day? One name. Give me your driver of the day.
I'm going to give it to Max.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for your answer after being pushed for it. But yeah, I'm going to give it to the legend that is Kimi Räikkönen. I know he might end up in like 13th or 14th, maybe, but we don't know at this point. And when I'm telling you my driver of the day, he came 9th, and after a qualifying where he was going to start the race in 16th, you're thinking a bit worrying, but of course he had a great start, and I said in my prediction he'll get in the points, and he did, and I was very proud of him. Coming from 16th to 9th is very impressive, and I think last race in Bahrain he went a bit under the radar. I thought he drove well, and I thought he drove well again, even though he might get a penalty for an infringement with the rolling start. But he came 9th now, so I'm giving you my driver of the day. But yeah, that wraps up our review of the Emilia Romagna Grand Prix. But yeah, thank you for watching, guys. Comment below who you think was driver of the day, or what you thought on any of the major incidents. But yeah, next race is at the Algarve International Circuit in Portugal. And yeah, we'll have content for you then. But yeah, thank you for watching, and see you guys later.